In this video, I'm going to share with you my biggest Pokemon card investing mistake that cost me $2,000 in losses. The biggest loss I've had, and it burned me out of investing in these cards. It's this card here, and I'm going to reveal what it is, and I'm actually going to, resell it, liquidate, and recapture some of my losses a bit. And let's just get into it. So the reason why I'm telling you this story is because a lot of people in crypto or investing or Pokemon cards only highlight or show you their wins or that they're successful, and you never see the graveyard of 100 times more people who tried to do the same thing or did the same thing and failed and lost a lot of money. And that's a really dangerous thing of survivorship bias that some people may exploit to get you. And I was actually kind of taken in by the hype. This happened back in the quarantine pandemic. And there were certain business gurus that I admired, like Gary Vaynerchuk. And he was just really hyping up Pokemon cards and doing your research. And I did my research. Like he said, I put in more than 100 hours, probably like multiple hundreds, doing research on Pokemon cards, consuming videos, getting into the content, the discussion, joining even like a paid community. And I'll break down exactly the mistakes I made, what I learned from them, and why I'm just kind of backing out of this field overall. But first, you want to see what card this is. So it is the BGS 8.5 Near Mint Charizard base set unlimited vintage card, first ever set released. I bought this in an auction at the peak hype of Pokemon card investing in around the pandemic for about $2,500. I spent way over my budget. I was supposed to spend like $500 a month, but there's something psychological and dangerous with auctions. Actually, Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger talk about why they never participate in auctions, because there's kind of this Lollapalooza effect of a lot of psychological biases going that make you go crazy. And basically, I spent way more than I should have to buy this card, thinking I would turn a profit. And sure enough, I would say maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, the prices crashed. I bought at the peak. Who would have known that was the peak? I saw them going up and up. And you just never know. You never know with these things. Some people will claim that they know, that there's some methodology to it. And at least for me, it did not work out. It crashed, and the price has been much lower ever since. And so I'm actually selling this card for about $500 once you minus eBay fees and shipping and everything. And I may pay for insurance to ship the card. It'll be probably like $450 that I sell it for. So hence about $2,100 in losses. Much more, at least for me, it was a significant, noticeable drop in my savings. But it happens. You live and learn. I mean, I've also spent my life savings about 3,000 plus to back in 2015 to fly to Vid Summit, thinking it would turn me into a YouTube superstar. It did not. It was a massive investment in money. I didn't really feel like I got the return on it. And yeah, I just, that's another story for another day. But jumping back to the specific things I learned from this, some of the principles I learned was that the rarer, the mintier, the more in demand, and the older, the better. And this card had most of those, but this is not a rare card. And I thought that the demand for this card would make up for it. It's an iconic card. It's probably the most sought after card in the first vintage set. So I thought that's pretty amazing. Everyone knows Charizard. Everyone loves it. So people, some gurus, some YouTubers, PokeTubers were talking about how this card is an exception because even though it's not rare, there's so much demand that it doesn't matter. Like the price, it'll just keep driving the prices up. But of course, the bubble had to pop at some point. people were stuck at home with extra expendable income, and the prices at some point just get too ridiculous. And I thought they would still be good. Maybe I could resell it in a couple months or something, or a few months or a year, or hold on to it and the value would retain, and it did not. Now, I really wanted the first edition one, which is also rare. However, that's where things kind of screwed up for me, because I thought I can translate that to the base unlimited set. I couldn't afford the Shadowless, which is like a tier below. Still rare, but not as rare as the first edition. And the thing is, it doesn't translate. But this was like the only thing in my budget compared to like first edition and Shadowless that was a holo vintage set. And it was a mistake, because the unlimited set was printed to death. Apparently there were freight carriers of this. And yeah, when I joined the paid community of SM Pratt, which is probably one of the only PokeTubers I trust nowadays about their expertise, he has like a Patreon. He basically explained what I just explained to you, why, I screwed up on this. Now, having spent hundreds of hours consuming advice on this, I really still feel like it's basically just those principles, and then the rest is just speculation. Like, people will rationalize or say that they know what's going to be good or bad, but there's no real solid substantiated evidence behind it, just like gut feeling and feeling of the trends, and that's really hard to emulate. And so I really felt like I needed to back out of this market. I did make some other investments that went up, but surely not enough to offset my $2,000 loss. For example, I purchased like a master ball, like an actual physical ball, limited time release, and only like 5,000 were printed. It was released recently. I bought the whole, like this big thing, and then resold it and made a couple $100. But that's not gonna change anything. And it was hard to predict. You never knew. Some of these physical products, exclusive things, don't go up in price. So you just never know. I've certainly bought various booster boxes, sets, tins, tons of individual cards, and some of them you think they would go up, and they don't. And some of them, these PokeTubers will recommend, and they'll say it's not financial advice or investment advice. So, there's that disclaimer, but you think they'll go up and they don't. So you just never know. There's a bunch of things I've bought from various sets, probably over 100 cards purchased. And at this point, now that it's 2024, I think it's just time to liquidate all of it. I did make some decent flips on a couple things, made $100 in another flip. That was probably my best purchase, but I lost a bunch as well from making beginner mistakes. Sending something without a tracking code and then getting scammed and not being paid, or trying to sell off Facebook groups to save money on eBay fees, and then the dude asked to change their shipping address at the last second, which I allowed, without updating the tracking information and payment info. And I lost like $200-300 there when he claimed the package went missing, even though the tracking information said that it was shipped. But since that tracking number wasn't tied to the original tracking number, and I didn't update the PayPal information on the purchase transaction, PayPal sided with him. So there's all these like things you learn in the process, and really it just felt like I was on quicksand. None of it seemed like a strong foundation. Like there was no real numbers behind it that like proved that this was like a solid, confident buy. And I joined all the Patreons. I joined Pokenomics Patreon for a bit too, but it was just really hard to do. So my advice is just keep it a passion. Do it for fun. Expect not to make money from it. Just collect it for the fun of it. This is a really cool card, and I enjoyed owning it as a collector. I've played Pokemon for years, played most of the games that have been released. And so just do it as a hobby. Don't do it to try and make money from it. I think there's a rare few who are able to do it, and they have some type of gut trend reaction or just really understand the markets, but like, or they got in really early. And like some of them, you know how like there's that whole investing analogy where like, you know, if you have a million monkeys and they flip coins, and like one of them is going to flip heads 10 times in a row, and then everyone is going to think he's a guru, but it's really just a monkey that got lucky. And this monkey was going to write all these books about how to be a pro coin flipper, but he was just lucky and he's convinced himself he's a guru. So there's a bunch of that going on here. And, you know, having watched hundreds of hours of, you know, Patreon videos and all this other stuff on YouTube, it just still feels like a big guessing game. And I feel like some of them are just more so good at like spotting small pockets, which they don't reveal to the public, doing these quick resale flips where they buy stuff, maybe new card sets in bulk, and then resell them for a slight margin. I mean, it's just not a business or game that I want to get into. So I took a swing at it, and it's a cautionary tale that you don't hear as much of as you should. You just hear these stories of how I made all this money. And part of that's because of the audience. They care, they focus, and they click more on the make money than the lose money stuff. Even though the loss, it hurts a lot more. And so, you know, maybe I can help change that. But it's not always the case. And you got to be cautious of these gurus, whether it's Gary Vaynerchuk. While I do still respect him a lot for his work ethic and business tips, sometimes I think he's not always on point, and there's a lot of potential backburn from that with, you know, his NFT hypes and stuff like that. And sure, like he tries to kind of remediate that nowadays by giving disclaimers and saying 99% of NFTs will fail, but you still got to be cautious. Not all the young kids hear that. So it was quite a painful loss, but it could have been a much worse loss of income. It's something I can recover from, and maybe it was a lesson learned. So yeah, if you are someone who's successful at this, maybe you can still learn something. If you're not, just be cautious. And yeah, $2,000 down the drain over a piece of cardboard. A great piece of cardboard. I mean, I would like to keep this in a way because I still love to collect, but I do want to kind of liquidate and like recoup my losses a bit. And yeah, beautiful card, but certainly not rare. And even if you have all these things going, all those principles, at the end of the day, it's really just, you know, supply and demand. And that's really hard to gauge for sure. There are cards that have a lot of rarity, and they are very minty, and they're very old, let's say, but they're not very desired and their prices are really low. Or they are very desired, but for some reason their prices are still not as high as you think. Take like some obscure like 4th generation or 5th generation set that was still released really long time ago in like the early 2000s or 90s, but no one really cares about them or buys them. So you just never know with this market. And you know, certainly I think it's better left to be a hobby. So I could talk about this for ages. If you have any specific questions, I could answer them in the comments.